doesn't know God, and there's absolutely no reason why he shouldn't. And I know that for a lot of you, God died when your grandmother died, or when your parents died, or when a pastor left, or this person or that person who you related to God through went up and left, either died or is gone or split or did whatever. And in essence, you have been without him. But if you're without God today, and if you're without an intimate and abiding relationship with him, it's because you simply don't pursue it or want it. Jesus tells that parable about the person who was persistent in asking for something. Jacob wrestled the angel to the ground to get a blessing. If you come begging your neighbor in the middle of the night for some bread and you keep him up, he's going to give it to you so you can go back to bed. Remember that? If you want something from God, you have to beg for it. Be persistent. Ask for it. That's what Elisha wanted. Well, the second thing I want us to look at here is the deployment of these weapons, the weapons deployment. Because this is probably the crux of the story. If you look at verses 15 to 18 again, Elisha said, okay, stop crying. Take a bow and arrows. So he took a bow and arrows. And he said to the king of Israel, put your hand on the bow. And he put his hand on it. Then Elisha laid his hands on the king's hands. And he said, open the window toward the east. And he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. And he said, the Lord's arrow of victory, even the arrow of victory over Aram. For you shall defeat the Arameans or the Syrians at Aphek until you have destroyed them. Then he said, take the arrows. And he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground. And he struck it 3 times and stopped. Okay, 2 things are going on here with these 2 parts of the weapons. The first thing is the shooting of the arrow. And with the shooting of the arrow, God's will is being declared. When Elisha told him to take that bow, remember he put his hand, Joash put his hand on, Elisha put his hands on, he said, now take that bow, and I want you to open the window to the east, and that east is where the Syrians live. He said, open the window to the east, and I want you to take an arrow, I want you to put it in the bow, and I want you to draw it back. And he drew it back, and he said, fire, and he shot. And that arrow went out that window and landed and hit its mark somewhere east. And what God was saying by having him do that is he's saying, I have declared victory for you over Syria. That's my will. My will for you, Joash, and for the people of Israel over whom you govern is I want you to defeat the Syrians. That's what I want. But unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. And for all of us, we wish it was that simple, that God would declare something and in essence do it. But there always seems to be this second part where he wants to gauge our level of agreement. It's all throughout the Bible. But there's this second thing, which is the striking of the arrows on the ground. And here, Elisha said, okay, now I want you to take some arrows, and I'm not going to put my hand on your hand now. I'm taking my hand off of your hand, and you're going to grab these arrows by yourself, and I want you to strike these arrows in the ground. And Joash takes those in and goes, strikes it 3 times. And here, and I know it's imperfect, and to us it seems like, what was Joash supposed to do? He didn't know, but we just trust that this was an accurate way for God and for Elisha to have evidence of Joash's level of agreement in his heart and mind with what God had decided to do. Now, when you became a believer, and this is what's going on here between God declaring what his will is, in essence saying what is available to you, and then our level of agreement, which is basically our access to it, do you want it or not? What's going on here is that when every one of you became a believer, God, in essence, came and said, okay, I want you to open all the windows in your house. I want you to open the window to the north. I want you to open the window to the south and to the east and to the west. And he had us shoot arrows out of every one of our windows in our house. He had us point to the north and shoot an arrow against sin and temptation. He had us point to the south and shoot an arrow against our powerlessness, our impotence, if you want to put it that way. He had us point an arrow to the east, and we shot an arrow over ignorance. And he even had us shoot an arrow against Satan himself. And in every one of these arrows that he had us shoot over sin and temptation and ignorance and powerlessness and over Satan and all these other things, what he was doing was he was assuring victory for you of those things. Read the book of 1 John. Read the Gospels, and you'll find in the Bible that he is promising you victory over all these things. There's no doubt about what God's will is for you as a believer. He's made you a new creation. He wants you to be free, right? He wants you to be holy. He wants you to be righteous. And he's declared that it's possible. But unfortunately, it's not enough that he just simply shoots these arrows out of our windows and declares that we have victory over them. Because now comes our response. It wasn't enough that he gave Israel the promised land. They had to go take it, right? They had to go get bloody. They had to defeat all these people that lived there. And that's why most people stayed in the desert anyway and died. And that's why only Joshua and Caleb went, because they were the only ones that believed they could make it. And so what happens to us is that we end up saying, okay, I want Goliath roughed up. I want somebody to go break Goliath's legs, and I don't mind going and kicking him. I don't mind giving him a good beating. But do we really have to cut off his head? I mean, that seems like a bit much. I want to rough up sin in my life. I want to break its legs. I want to stand on top of it and beat it a little bit. But do we have to cut it off? I mean, cut its head off entirely? I'm not sure I want to do that. And we say, I want God dwelling in the temple. I want his spirit in the temple. I really do. And I'm happy that God's going to dwell in the temple, but I don't think I want to be the temple. I want God dwelling in the temple so that I can go to the temple and be with God, but I'm not sure I want to actually be the temple. I don't know if I want him indwelling me all the time. And we say, I want a future. I really do, but I'm not sure I necessarily need a present. I'm looking forward to dwelling with God in eternity, but I'm not necessarily excited about living with him now. And we say, I want a Savior, but I'm not crazy about all the strings that are attached. I like the idea of a Savior, maybe not as much a Lord. And that's what happens to us. You see what I'm saying? Is that we agree with God only in part about what he wants to do. And because we only agree in part, because our enthusiasm for what he wants is dimmed and darkened and not in complete agreement, we only have partial victory, right? And so for Joash here, he was only going to get partial victory over the Arameans, over the Syrians, because he only partially agreed with their destruction. And if you only partially agree with God in what he wants to do, you're only going to know partial victory, okay? And so your spiritual poverty is your fault, because there's plenty of availability to these things, but there's not plenty of agreement. Getting a library card does not make you smarter. Okay? I have a library card, and you go get a library card, you're given access, what's being made available to you are thousands of volumes full of information. And because of the Pines card that I have, I can go on the internet and I can access all of that information. But it doesn't make me any smarter unless I go and read, right? Well, in the same way, your salvation and you claiming Christ as your Savior makes